Your voice, your opinion, your community. Fact TV, free speech, protected.
I'm Robert McBride, and this is Everyday People, a program in which we investigate the lives of people making a difference in our community. Hi, this is Robert McBride with the Rockingham Arts and Museum Project and another episode of Everyday People, having discussions with people in our community that help to make a difference. On today's show, we have Greg Hessel with us, who is actually a consultant working with the Windham Windsor Housing Trust, based out of Brattleboro, but includes territories in Bellows Falls all the way up to Windsor, that manages and creates affordable housing. So we're going to talk to him a little bit today about why he's consulting with them, and also about the important role that affordable housing plays in our communities to secure people living there and not being shoved away, and to keep our communities rich. So welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great, great, great. So where would you like to start, and what would you like to share with us about yourself? So you're a consultant. I read your thing, man. You've done a lot of wild stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I feel blessed to be able to do the work I do and help people figure out, tricky issues and make a living at it and work. I work a lot locally. I work in New England, and so I'm an organizational development consultant. So I do a lot of strategic planning, team building, working with teams with low morale, leading retreats, a little bit of executive coaching. So all that kind of stuff.
Great, great.
Yeah.
So, how did you hook up with Windham Windsor Housing Trust?
Yeah, so I had a very good friend who was in the affordable housing movement, and so I have two boys. They're 11 and 16, and so when my youngest boy turned 2, I think, I felt like I could start doing some volunteer work and giving something back to the community. So I approached Connie Snow at the time and asked to be on the board. The house we live in is part of their shared equity program, so we lease our land from it used to be Brattleboro Affordable Housing Coalition, but the Windham Windsor Housing Trust now. And and so I wanted to do some volunteer work, so I got on the board. I did an 8-year stint, and
wow.
They kicked me off because I did my 8 years in May, I guess.
Okay,
May or June.
cool.
So yeah, the last couple of years I was the board chair, and I just love the organization. I think they do fabulous stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, we've been involved in it through the Exner block where RAMP has its office, and originally it was a dilapidated building that at that time Housing Vermont and the Rockingham Area Community Land Trust did as an affordable housing project, creating 10 affordable units with a preference given to artists and 6 retail spaces. And then subsequently Windham Windsor Housing Trust took over that property and has been with it for about probably 6 or 7 years already, and other projects. In the background, you might see there's different projects that Windham Windsor Housing Trust has done in Bellows Falls over the last several years. And they're responsible for probably managing about at least 40 to 50 tenant situations, I would say conservatively, because I know between the Exner block, the Howard block, the potential of the garage building being finished in the next 2 years is about 35, 40 places already, but they own a lot of housing and multi-family housing too.
And I know, when I was on the board, we finished a strategic planning process, and strategically, I think they took over the Rockingham affordable area.
Rockingham Area Community Land Trust. Yep, RACLT.
Their portfolio 6-7 years ago, something like that, and I think there was a sense that they really wanted to have more of a presence in this area, and so the project I'm working on is part of their effort to refocus on this area, and it's I think they've always wanted to have projects in the area, but they're located in Brattleboro, and it's tricky finding a project that has good potential for development. And some potential projects didn't work out, but I think now they're kind of re-upping the focus on this area and really trying to have, whereas I think in Brattleboro they've kind of done a critical mass of projects, and it's really made an impact on the community.
Absolutely.
And I think they want to be as focused as they can be and see if they can do that in this area.
Great, great. So what are you doing here in Bellows Falls, or what are you going to try to do here in Bellows Falls?
Yeah, so I think there's a number of initiatives. One of them being the state. It's really costly to develop new housing, and so the state is pushing this idea of 1 to 4 units, sometime maybe owner occupied. You have a duplex, you have a in-law apartment connected to your house, and people want to rent those out or could rent those out, or maybe even are renting them out. But then as you start renting, there's codes and there's complexity and there's the lead law people have to comply with. And so the project is what kind of supports might allow more housing to get on the market, rental units to get on the market. And are there people who are taking their properties off the market or aren't reinvesting in them because of either the cost of repairs? We were talking a little bit about just managing construction projects can be overwhelming. As you start looking at buildings, you might think, well, I just need a new roof, but somebody does a walkthrough and says, well, really, to get up to code, you got 4 or 5 issues. So it can be complicated, it can be costly, and it can be overwhelming for people. And so there's the possibility of getting some foundation funding to invest in, kind of targeting that population of people who own, small units. And maybe it's not their primary profession of renting units, but it's something they do. And how to reinvest in the housing stock in this area. And I was talking to people at the town offices 3-4 weeks ago, and one of the things Chuck Wise, he said like the substructure of the housing in this area, he says, is really solid. It was made of really good, first growth timber, and it's solid, and so it's worth investing in. And so the idea is, can we how to best use resources that might allow people to reinvest in the housing stock and really just get more rental housing on the market in this area of good quality.
And I think what's kind of really interesting about this program is that Windham Windsor Housing Trust is a not-for-profit and does do affordable housing. But the focus of this is to reach out to private individuals and private landlords that might not think they have accessibility to a program like this.
Exactly. Yeah,
and they're not a not-for-profit and they can't do this, but it would be maybe a more direct way as opposed to just even going to a bank or something.
Right, exactly, yeah. So there is, currently Windham Windsor Housing Trust has a program to help their, like, properties that I own, of people who own their homes, do some repairs, so there's some low-income loans, and there's some, HUD grants available to help people do that. And so that's really, as of the last couple of years, been expanded to anybody who has small rental units. So there's some HUD money available. It's like a $2,500 grant per unit and another $2,500 for the envelope of the building that people can apply for. But then, with HUD money comes some hoops you have to jump through, right? And so it can be kind of complicated, and they haven't had a huge interest in that. And so they're kind of exploring how to, either with that or some outside funding that might have less restrictions, how might they structure a program that would really help the housing stock in this area.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. So how are you what point are you at now with, you got some money to come and investigate this, and so what's your strategy? Where do you need help? Where do you need feedback from?
Yeah, so what I've done so far, NeighborWorks Vermont, they have a similar program in the Bennington area. So I've kind of talked with them and say, what would you do differently? What are your lessons learned? I think by the end of their 3-year grant cycle, they will have rehabbed like 18 buildings, 18 apartments, not buildings. So I've spoke with them. I spoke with the folks currently working with Windham and Windsor Housing Trust, working on home repairs. I've spoken with folks at the town offices, and then a number of landlords. And I think I'm really looking to connect with more landlords. I developed a survey that I'm hoping landlords in the area will take, that we can do some analysis of that. And then really try to synthesize all that data and do some number crunching of the surveys and some analysis and figure out what's our best guess as to what kind of programs are gonna help out here.
And has it been? Is it difficult to track down some of that information?
Yeah, it's it's interesting. like even how many units there are on the market and what, like Wendy in the town offices, she suggested, well, landlords have to send some information with their taxes, right? She said, well, maybe the state has it, the State Department of Taxes. And they said, well, yeah, people send it in, but they send in hard copies, or sometimes they do it electronically. We don't, have it in any spot, right? So some of the information, it's more anecdotal than, so it is a little bit hard to figure out exactly. And I think the other but the other grouping of people that's been hard to figure out how to connect with is people who have like gotten out of the business just because it's too complicated, right? So I haven't found a lot of those folks yet, but I'm really interested to connect with somebody who's just, I need some repairs, and then there's this historical stuff I have to go through, and I can't get vinyl wingings, I have to get wood windows, and it's too costly and it's too complicated, and it's not worth it. So those are the folks I'm really interested in getting their stories from, because I think that's really going to help inform, the recommendations I make, so that if there is new grant money infused in the community, how to best spend it.
So how long have you been at this?
Well, it's been, the project came up really quickly, and there's a short turnaround. So there's the potential funding source, let me see, so we're in mid-February. In early April is when Windham Windsor Housing Trust would have to use this information and apply for some money from the Holt Foundation. So initially I was given like a 2-month window, and now it's extended a little bit to 2.5 or 3 months, but I just started in early January, and I'm probably about halfway through the project. But need to start moving towards synthesizing the data fairly soon.
Right. So if there's a landlord in Rockingham out there listening to this that would like to participate in your survey, is it online at Windham Windsor Housing Trust? Because if we don't have the exact link, but where would we refer them?
So if they emailed or called me, I could certainly get it to them. So my email is Greg, G-R-E-G, at goregen.org. So I'd be happy to, and actually we're offering a $25 Visa card if folks take it out.
Fantastic.
Fill it out. So just as a little incentive, and to honor people's time. We appreciate people taking the time.
So from some of the lists that you've gathered so far around Rockingham, do you have any idea of about how many landlords are out there?
No, that's one of the challenges. And actually, I'm working with Bruce Whitney from the Windham Windsor Housing Trust on so he's kind of looking at numbers, and he's kind of running with that aspect of the project. And I'm just trying to figure out like what are the barriers, and how to best solve them.
Right. Yeah, great. So, if you use your imagination, because I know you're going to analyze these results, but like what kind of programming do you imagine might be possible to suggest or exist? Like, like to kind of get people's imagination going. Like I'm a private landlord, I have a 6-unit building. So one landlord is I have a 6-unit building, 2 of them are vacant, the place needs work. And then another scenario could be I'm the homeowner that has a duplex or an apartment that I'm letting sit vacant. And so if we were imagining those two kind of scenarios, and you're interested in gathering information, but then what you might be able to say, hey, there's a program that exists. Let's pretend the program exists.
So I'm going to say 2 things to that. So first of all, there are a lot of programs that exist already that people don't know about. Right?
Tell us.
So Bruce was telling me, there's some state funding for lead removal, right? And it's typically targeting homes with infants. But if there's any apartment building, it's available for it. And it's like a revolving loan fund, but it's forgivable after a number of years. And occasionally they run out of money. But so one of the challenges that I'm finding is there's that program, there's Efficiency Vermont, there's a lot of people who do this work, but their funding always changes and what they're focused on always changes. So I think one thing I'm hoping to do is just recommend consolidating, and like Bruce has a lot of that in his head, but landlords may not, right? So accessing resources at Windham and Windsor Housing Trust just to say like what's available, right? Because there are things out there and a lot of people don't know about them. But to answer your program, if a program exists, so what NeighborWorks Vermont did in Bennington, so I'll tell you about their program. So they got some grant funding, and they offered a couple different rounds. One was $7,500 grant, the next one was $8,500. And it was a grant that required a 200% match, right? So you put in 15,000, you get 7,500. But it's basically free money to get and they particularly targeted vacant buildings in downtown Bennington that could be rental, and tried to put together a package of funding and financing, and that was what they found is the more, one of the challenges that Windham and Windsor Housing Trust has is they have a mission to have, affordable housing, right?
Correct.
So they don't want to give somebody money who's then going to rent it to, a millionaire for a ton of money, right? So there have to be some mechanisms to make sure it's affordable over a period of time. But I think what folks in Bennington found is they had so many hoops attached that a lot of people just lost interest. So the idea, I think, is one of my recommendations is to keep it as simple as possible, right? And make it easy for folks to access it, to do work, to bring buildings up to code. And, my sense in this area is most of the rent kind of meets affordable housing prices. Like, the market doesn't really absorb really high rents. So I'm not sure that's a huge issue, but what could the program look like? It could look like, you access some money, you go through a screening process, you say for the next 5 years, I'm gonna keep this on the market, it's gonna be affordable. Somebody may or may not need to do a walkthrough to make sure that you're dealing with all the issues to keep it up to code, and not just, the one issue that you're focused on. And there could be some, in addition, some other funding mechanisms. There's this current HUD funding, which is probably the most complex, but, kind of piecing some funding together. That would allow, kind of helping to put people over the edge of what's going to make it affordable.
Now, I imagine there's some sort of breakdown between what I would call a sort of a landlord that's bought a 5 or 6 unit building, and then a primary homeowner who has an apartment in their house. And I think because one sense I call the landlord the person that's investing in the commercial property, that they've made an investment in that, and not that there aren't challenges in that investment, but they could have taken their money, put it in the stock market, they could have put it somewhere else. So it's a business investment, and not that they don't need help and support, as opposed to the primary homeowner who doesn't have enough money to fix something to supplement their income, could be falling into an older age bracket where they're on a limited income. So I imagine there might be some kind of sensitivity to the person applying, and maybe percentages of things that it would take, because you mentioned $7,500 that they used in the Bennington program, and then people could match that and get it. But I imagine for a lot of people, even that sort of investment of $7,500 sitting in their bank account ready to match a fund could be a challenge in itself. It could be. And I think, the other kind of push for this is coming from the state, and they are targeting like 1 to 4 unit buildings, and, it doesn't have to be owner occupied, but I think their sense is people who are kind of running their business have figured it out, and maybe they have the economy of scale to, they understand the code, right? They understand the issues. But it's like you said, the owner-occupied small operations, those could use some support. And there's a lot of housing stock. It's beautiful housing, and to get it on the market, the more on the market, the better. Right. Well, and I think also your approach is one that you're just trying to gather information, and I think there's situations that we don't even know what kind of information what we're going to do with that information when we gather it. Not in a negative sense, but in the sense that to develop the program, it's kind of like, it's not like it's a kind of chicken or egg thing. Is it better to get as much information from a variety of landlords, and then hearing their claims, and then you try to put a program together, or it sort of bubbles up from the bottom up more than sort of, we figured out this, and this, and then you start to apply and figure out, well, it's not working here and it's not working there. Does that make any sense? Kind of what I'm trying to say.
And I think it's like a little bit of both, right?
Exactly.
They'll come up with a plan and hopefully get funding, and no plan ever goes exactly as you envision it, right?
Of course.
So ideally they'll be flexible and be able to make adjustments.
Well, I think what's also really
and let me just say one more thing
Sure.
is like we're trying to be very open to what bubbles up, right?
Yes.
So one of the things we were chatting about just before the program started is when the Windham Windsor Housing Trust was doing their strategic planning. This idea kind of floated is they have a lot of expertise in property management, right? And so our people, like anecdotally, I do some work with some of the homeless coalitions around the state, and they talk about like some homeless folks, like people not wanting to rent to them because some of them, there's a history of being difficult clients, right?
Okay.
And so, like, could property management services that Windham and Windsor Housing Trust has some expertise in, right, allow some people to say, yeah, I'm going to rent, right? Going to rent to this person because somebody can vouch for them, somebody is working with them, somebody has screened them, and somebody is dealing with all those like headaches, right?
Yeah.
So if that's what's needed, then I think I want to hear that,
Right.
and maybe both are needed. But I'm trying to be just very open to what people are saying.
No, because I'm a landlord myself, and I always appreciate a triage kind of situation. I call it, because otherwise a landlord is you're in the middle of, if you have problems with a tenant, your only recourse then is the eviction process.
Yeah.
Which becomes very long,
Yeah.
very expensive, and very drawn out. And I believe that tenants should definitely have rights.
Yeah.
I mean, it should be a really equal thing. But it's really very frustrating once you do get involved in an eviction process. And off the record, sometimes it's easier just to give the tenants money to move.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like not what you're trying to do.
Right.
And so I think having a situation where someone is vetting the tenants more, might even have some kind of relationship.
Yeah.
With them, that's a huge relief off your mind. Say, no, let's make this work. It's not working. We got to move this along.
Yeah.
But it doesn't become a legal issue. Per se.
Right.
And then all this money and takes 6 months.
It's complicated.
8 months.
It's costly.
And it's costly.
Yeah. Yeah. And along those lines, I was talking to one landlord who really has some experience over the last number of years just renting to people with Section 8s. And his sense was, the advantage of it, like some people are hesitant about renting, but he said, they're vetted and I've had very few issues, but when I have partners to help me figure it out. So it's just a different lens of kind of thinking about
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah. It's really, and I think what's also we sort of got the high sign for a few minutes left, but I think what's also very exciting about this program is that it's not just Rockingham we're talking about, it's like rural communities struggle with housing, struggle with property values, maintaining things. So it's a real interesting, kind of template. I was talking to some people, and maybe short of maybe somewhere in Burlington, I don't think any private developer could maybe think of trying to build some kind of apartment house to sell and make money off of and make the figures work. It just doesn't. So people, are sort of sometimes hesitant about affordable housing, but they're coming in, your organizations, bringing things up to code, and no one else is going to do that. No one's going to build an apartment building in your downtown or fix one. And I know the affordable housing people have gotten a lot more involved with downtowns over the years with the designated downtown program, and that brings them up against buildings with commercial spaces. So they have a lot of challenges about financing those because their mission, like you said before, is housing. The money they get from the federal government is for the housing, not the commercial spaces.
Right.
So they've been challenged in a way, but yet it's really enlivened our downtowns.
Yeah, and that's the whole, the goal is, I think housing is just such a fundamental, we're looking at the opiate crisis, and, a lot of people are saying, and research I think has shown that housing is the first mechanism of defense. Like if anybody's going to be stabilized, they need housing.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's just such a critical service, whether it's about economic development or, hopefully we're going to start moving the needle and have a little bit already, and we'll keep moving it in this area.
So I'm glad you have 2 sentences to say your name. If people need to contact you or learn more about this survey study, how do they reach you?
Yeah, Greg Hessel, live in Brattleboro. My company is Regeneration Resources. They could Google it, or my email is greg, G-R-E-G, @goregen, GOREGEN.org.
That's great. Thank you. So I just wanted to say once again, thank you to Fact TV for being such a great resource in our community for us to access each other and share the news about what's going on. I also We would like to thank the Vermont Arts Council, the National Endowment for the Arts, Chroma Technology, and the Windham Foundation for supporting RAMP, and all of you out there who support RAMP. Enjoy living in the community. So until next time, when we see each other on the square, this is Robert McBride.